Adrian Smith also designed the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. The Trump building looks a lot like the Burj Khalifa. If you want to check the Burj Khalifa out online, the Burj Khalifa is kind of tall, blue, and spinny. Feel free to check that out after our tour. When we come out from under this bridge, we'll go from the 2000s, when the Trump building was built, to the 1920s, with the Jewelers building, which will appear on our left-hand side. When we come out from under this next bridge, we'll talk about this building on the left. It has a big dome on top. See that big dome on top? It's got little domes on each corner. Those little domes are called tempiettos. That means little temple in Italian. Those tempiettos are common in Western Europe, specifically in Italy, but not in Chicago. Why are Chicago architects in the 1920s using elements of Western European architecture? Well, the answer is that in the 1920s, the young United States did not yet have its own strong sense of beauty, but instead looked to Europe for aesthetic inspiration when it came to architecture. This building is the Jewelers building because it was built to be a high-tech office building for jewelers in the 20s. A car elevator brought the jeweler, jewels, and car all up to their floor without ever leaving their vehicle for security reasons. So that's the Jewelers building. That style was popular. The style is called European Revivalism, by the way, being influenced by European architectural motifs. That style was popular in the early 1920s. We'll talk about a style from the late 1920s later on called Art Deco. Let's flash forward to the 70s on our right-hand side. See this black boxy structure on the right-hand side? This is the AMA building, or American Medical Association building. It's an example of black box modernism, another style. It's designed by the father of that style, black box modernism, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, whose very famous motto was "less is more." Mies van der Rohe believed that beauty lay in the precision of the engineering and the perfection of the mathematics. This style of black box modernism is very important to us here in Chicago, as there are over 60 of these types of black boxes in our city. We'll talk about many along the river. See these twin cork-out towers on the right-hand side? Most photographed structures in the city of Chicago, Marina City, designed by a student of that last architect, Mies van der Rohe, named Bertrand Goldberg. Bertrand Goldberg wanted people to live downtown in the late 1960s when not many people did so. People more commonly lived in a neighborhood and commuted downtown for work. Bertrand Goldberg's solution to get people living downtown was to build a city within a city that had all the services a tenant would need. There weren't a lot of services, shops, bars, and restaurants in the late 1960s in Chicago. And this city within a city, look how alive it looks. There's all the elements right here. It's got this marina parking at the base. This is where I keep my yacht, by the way. It's in the shop right now. You can't see it. It comes out of the shop. You go right back there. There's a steakhouse, a lively steakhouse on the right-hand side. Okay, the bar's closed down, but at some point the bar will get replaced with a real bar. That curvy rooftop to the back, that's the top of a House of Blues, a music venue. That's valet parking up there on the left and right-hand side. People will leave it for the evening. What you can't see in the city within a city is the ice skating rink, bowling alley, and supermarket. Today we call this big idea of city within a city, mixing some residential with some retail, mixed use. This is the first large mixed use development in the United States. When we come out from under this next bridge, we'll talk about this building on the left-hand side. It looks a lot like a Greek temple. Draw your eyes all the way to the top. See that Greek temple shape all the way at the top there? This building also has a bottom, middle, and top, base, shaft, and capital, sometimes called tripartite design. We call this style the neoclassical style because it takes elements of classical forms, such as a Greek temple, but is built with modern materials. This Greek temple is built and clad in that white granite and mirrored glass you see right there. It also will look really nicely lit up when we come back. So let's look at this building again later on. As we come out from under this next bridge, we'll talk about this area on our left-hand side, a portion of the Riverwalk. There's one of 6 areas of the Riverwalk. Each has their own theme. This portion of the Riverwalk has this stadium seating paired with these trees seemingly growing out from under the concrete. Behind the Riverwalk right there is the Loop. To the south of it is the Loop. The Loop is the central business district where people primarily go to work and not to live. It's called the Loop because the L, or elevated train, makes a little loop shape in downtown Chicago. Next time you're looking at the train map downtown, look for that loop downtown. That's where the name of the loop comes from. We're going to next look at the earliest style of Chicago's tall buildings. The first style of Chicago tall buildings is called the First Chicago School. The first skyscraper, the first steel structure building, was built in the city of Chicago. So all the early tall buildings are right here in Chicago, and they all look like this red brick building on the right-hand side. The Chicago School of Psychology is what that building is named. It's an example of the first Chicago School of Architecture. It's got the two elements of that style of architecture: a bottom, middle, and top, base, shaft, and capital, also called tripartite design. It also has these large rectangular windows. Those are called Chicago-style windows because they were so popular here in Chicago. Large rectangular windows don't impress us this much these days, right? Pretty common to see them. But for them, in 1914, when that building was built, that was cutting-edge tech. You can't make windows that large unless you have structural steel you're using for the structure. So those large rectangular windows would get light and air into the interior parts of the building, letting workers work later and be more productive. We're going to go from the 1910s now to the late 1920s with this building on the right. Merchandise Mart. When built in 1930, it was the largest building in the world by square feet. It's a great example of Art Deco, and has three elements of Art Deco we'll see over and over again today. This building has the soaring vertical lines of limestone. Those lines draw your eye up, 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 make the building look even taller than it is and grander than it is. Those lines are created by deep inset windows, and the building recedes level by level at the top. Those are called setbacks. You see that? You see how the building recedes toward the top? Look how grand that entranceway is, by the way. See how tall that entranceway is? This style of Art Deco was popular in the late 1920s when the United States was experiencing the Roaring '20s. During the Roaring '20s, the stock market was going up, up, up. Cars were becoming widely available for the first time, and there's a lot of boldness and confidence in the future of the country. You can see that boldness and confidence in the facade of Art Deco buildings. When we come out from under this next bridge, we'll come into what I like to call the trophy case of Chicago architecture. We're almost surrounded by new buildings right here. Feel free to take out your phone. It's a beautiful moonshot right there. We'll be back here again, so you don't got to take all your photos right now. Let's start by talking about this curvy building right in front of us. See how it's got an upside down arch at the top and then an actual arch at the base? The building kind of looks like a McDonald's apple pie box. Called River Point because it's the exact point right there where the north branch of the river to the right meets the south branch of the river to the left. We're on the main branch of the Chicago River right now. That upside down arch at the top is just decorative, creates a nice little calling card for the building at night. The arch at the base is functional. The arch at the base accommodates a live active train line that cuts right under the building. As a matter of fact, all these holes here on the right hand side and that beige horizontal panel, those are functional as well. They're there to ventilate the live active train line that cuts right underneath that land. This whole area to our right hand side is all active train tracks. Will be so the entire duration of our journey starting right now. These landlords did deals with the railroad to build buildings on top of live train lines. And it's going to help us answer why this building on the right looks like a Y. See that building on the right hand side? Why does that building look like a Y? Well, we already answered half the question. Hemmed in from the back by live active train lines. It's hemmed in from the front by a 30-foot required city setback. Creating that very distinctive Y shape, the 8th floor becomes the 1st floor. Not enough space for a normal 1st floor. That building is only 39 feet wide and sits on 20% of its lot area. Now, a building this tall and this narrow in a city this windy, it's going to have to do something extra special about sway. And this building has 160,000 gallons of water at the very top to help it manage sway. Think of water in a bucket. If a bucket with water goes one way, water is going to slosh in the opposite direction. So those 160,000 gallons of water function like giant shock absorbers. If the building is behind it goes one way, the water is going to slosh in the opposite direction, helping to reduce sway. So that's inertial slosh dampers. The building on our left-hand side is Bank of America Tower. You'll see the top of those giant tripod I-beams right now. This building is subject to the same 30-foot setback ordinance we've talked about before. The way this building respects the setback ordinance is by vaulting the 3rd floor with these giant tripod I-beams. That way everyone wins. Residents can access the river area, which is the whole point of the 30-foot setback rule, and the building can start in full or in earnest on the 3rd floor right there. We're going to come into what I like to call the architectural time machine right now, and we're going to see 5 buildings built in chronological order. We're going to kind of decode them as we go, starting with this building on the left-hand side, this old, beautiful 1929 Art Deco building, the Civic Opera building. It's got the 3 elements of Art Deco we've seen before. It's got the soaring vertical lines on your left-hand side. Those soaring lines are created by deep incel windows, and the building has a setback. The unique shape of the setback of this structure is that throne shape. That throne shape is very common with Art Deco buildings. It was both required by the zoning of the era, but also helps get light and air into the interior parts of the building. And remember, this is before modern ventilation and modern lighting. See this rectangular appearing right here at the base of the building? That's the Opera House. The big idea of this building is that the office space to the left, right, and back would pay for the opera at the base. Pretty good idea, right? A self-supporting opera, only terrible timing. The Civic Opera building opened up 2 weeks before the great stock market crash of 1929. So the Civic Opera goes into bankruptcy soon after completion of construction. Today, the Lyric Opera is in the base of that building right there. The Lyric Opera is very successful, largest stage in downtown Chicago. Stage goes up and down with the assistance of river water pulled from behind it. So that Art Deco era, the Roaring 20s, ends with that stock market crash of 1929, which kind of ends things, right? Followed by the Great Depression, followed by World War II. So there's not a lot of office buildings like that constructed between 1929 and the late 50s. On the right-hand side, we'll see what office buildings look like when they get built in Chicago or across America again. We've got 2 more black boxes here. We've seen one earlier, the AMA building. These black boxes are clad in that distinctive black steel we've seen before. By the way, I told you this area all to our right is live train tracks. You can actually see the train level right there. These are buildings on top of live train tracks. But above those train tracks are the 2 black boxes. These black boxes are stark dark, cheap, and easy to make. Don't underestimate the importance of these black boxes being cheap and quick to make. The generation who built these black boxes in the 60s were a very frugal bunch. They had survived the Great Depression and World War II. They didn't want to spend a lot of extra money on the far more expensive cladding material of limestone or white terracotta. They also had to be quick to make because so few office buildings have been built in the last prior 30 years that they had to meet demand. So being cheap and quick to make is very important to understanding why there's over 60 of these types of black boxes in the city of Chicago. Let's flash forward from the 60s down to the 70s with that boxy building on the right-hand side, Gateway 3. It's like Gateway 1 and Gateway 2 in that it's a single color boxy structure. It's unlike Gateway 1 and Gateway 2 in that it's not clad in that black steel, but clad in white stone or concrete. We call this the international style because that building could go anywhere. It's the opposite of the style of contextualism, site-specific design. That building doesn't reference the river or any buildings nearby like a style of contextualism would. Like I said, if you go anywhere on any site, totally does not care what site it's on. We're going to go from the 70s now with the white box to the 80s and the end of our architectural time machine with this curvy building right here. Gateway 4, great shot of the moon there again. Gateway 4, the curve of the building imitates the curve of the river. The green glass of the building is a little nod to the green color of the river right here. That building only makes sense right there. It's an example of contextualism from the 1980s. Contextualism is popular in the 80s, 90s, and beyond. It's the most common popular style of a new building built in Chicago today. That's the style we started the tour talking about, contextualism. And that's the end of our architectural time machine. See that lit up little red Lego piece there on the left-hand side? Well, this building on the left is a black box. Another one, I told you there's over 60 of these in Chicago. Their marketing team had a pretty good idea to get us talking about this building because we usually never talk about it. The idea was to put themselves on a map. I put in a map on themselves. This is an $800,000 "You Are Here" sign. That red Lego piece is us. We're on the south branch of the Chicago River. We started up on the right-hand side on the main branch. Now we're on the south branch. So if you rent one of those kayaks and you get lost and your phone falls into the river and gets dark, just go right over here. This side will help you get home. I don't know if we have any Batman fans aboard this vessel. I'm a huge Batman fan myself. In the opening scene of the 2008 film, The Dark Knight, the Joker and his goons zipline onto the top of Gotham Bank. The real-world Gotham Bank is in our right-hand side. It's the old post office. The Joker and his goons zipline from the green building, Gateway 4, onto the top of the old post office, and the Joker escapes in a school bus going the wrong way down Van Buren Street. Watch that opening scene on YouTube after our tour today, the opening scene of The Dark Knight. It looks so much cooler now that you've seen where it was filmed.
I'm good, thanks.
The old post office was built in the 30s when Chicago was the catalog capital of the world. All the catalogers were based right here. Sears, Montgomery Ward, Marshall Fields. They needed this structure, the largest post office in the world at the time, to help them manage their mail. These days, we don't need a post office that big. Today, it's an office building. Uber, Walgreens, Pepsi, all have space there. There's a massive multi-acre green park on top that employees of the buildings that have space there can hang out in. Probably a pretty cool place to work. This highway cuts as the Eisenhower, cuts right through the base of the old post office. We're going to have a moment now to go into storytelling mode and to tell Chicago's foundational story, which is best told in 3 quick acts. The first act of Chicago's foundational story starts about 8 blocks away on our right-hand side in Catherine O'Leary's barn on DeKoven Street. Anyone know what happened there? On DeKoven Street, Catherine O'Leary's barn? See, in October of 1871, the city had never been drier. There had been no rain from July to October, and much of the city was constructed in wood, including, crucially, the roads and the alleys. Sounds pretty unsafe from a fire perspective to pair wood buildings with wood roads and wood alleys, right? A fire breaks out in Catherine O'Leary's barn, those 8 blocks away or so to our right-hand side, and due to high winds, the fire jumps across this branch of the river, spreads all the way to the lakefront, destroying the entire downtown in the process. The fire jumps across the main branch of the river where we got on the boat, due to those same high winds. Can you imagine a fire so tall it could lick across a river? The fire spreads up the north side up to today's Fullerton Avenue, all along the lakefront, destroying the whole residential neighborhood to the north. The fire rages for 3 whole days, only stops due to rains. The fire destroys 3.5 miles of the city of Chicago. Over 100,000 Chicagoans are made homeless, a third of the city or so, and 300 souls lose their lives. The fire is the worst, and hear me out, the best thing to ever happen to Chicago, and I'll explain. You see, the year of the fire, 1871, there's only 300,000 folks living here. Just 9 years later, the population has exploded by around 200,000 additional people. Well, what's going on? Where everyone's moving to the site of a disaster zone, the fire was the worst fire in urban history. It doesn't usually work that way, right? Where people move to a disaster zone. Well, you see, after that fire, the city of Chicago put out the call to architects to move here if they want some work. Those architects who moved here rebuilt Chicago in a lot more dense fashion. Those same architects started experimenting with new construction materials and construction methods, and as a result of all that experimentation, the first skyscraper in the world, the first steel structure building, is built in Chicago's downtown in 1885. It's the Home Insurance Building. It stood 10 stories high. For all human history, all construction had been wood, stone, or brick. So that first skyscraper, the first steel structure building, is a great break with the past. Without the Great Chicago Fire, all the most famous names in architecture would never have moved here, and the city would not look the way it does. Anyone know what the location today of Catherine O'Leary's barn is, or what's there? It's about 9 blocks away to our right. Today, the location of that barn is the location to our right, about 9 blocks away, is the location of the Chicago Fire Department Training Academy. And there's a Fireman's Maltese Cross on the floor where the fire actually broke out in Catherine O'Leary's barn. The second and quicker act of Chicago's foundational story is the World's Fair of 1893, held in the Jackson Park on the city's south side along the lakefront. Daniel Burnham is the chief architect of that World's Fair, and he designs a whole city of impermanent buildings painted white and built in the Greek and Roman styles. 27 million people come to that World's Fair of 1893 over 6 months. And those folks go back home to wherever they're from and tell their friends that Chicago had truly become a world-class city in the years after the Great Chicago Fire. The World's Fair is a time of many firsts. The World's Fair is the first time anyone had seen one of George P. Ferris's large Ferris wheels. And we'll see an example of what that might have looked like later on at Navy Pier. The World's Fair of 1893 is the first time anyone's seen Wrigley Juicy Fruit chewing gum, a zipper, a brownie, spray paint, Cracker Jacks, a dishwasher. It's a very long list of firsts at the World's Fair of 1893. I don't know if anyone drinks PBR beer, Pabst Blue Ribbon. I do. The World's Fair of 1893 is where Pabst Blue Ribbon gets their blue ribbon. The last remaining building of the World's Fair is the Museum of Science and Industry, which you can see today over in Jackson Park in the city's south side. The last and quickest act of Chicago's foundational story is the Burnham Plan of 1909. See, the city of Chicago went to that same architect of the World's Fair, Daniel Burnham, and asked for a plan to accommodate Chicago's next 100 years of growth. His solution is the Burnham Plan of 1909, and I'll point out many elements of that plan as we pass by them. But 3 quick examples of things that were implemented on the plan are our extensive lakefront and park system. There's over 600 parks here in Chicago. The whole lakefront is parked from the south to the north. Also on the Burnham Plan is the Riverwalk, which I pointed out, and we'll talk about some more. Last thing I'll mention on the Burnham Plan is the first double-decker drive in the world, Wacker Drive. I'll point that out and explain that later on. So that's Chicago's foundational story and 3 quick acts. The Great Chicago Fire destroyed the city, but the city came back stronger. The Burnham Plan of 1909, the World's Fair of 1893, cemented Chicago's status as a world-class city. And the Burnham Plan of 1909 created a vision of beauty for the next 100 years. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump off the mic for a few moments. I'm going to come around to see if anyone's got a question. We'll turn around further down the river. Now's another great opportunity to use the restroom or to go visit Sam at the bar and grab a drink from Sam. Sam's got hot and cold drinks. I'll be back on the mic in a few moments, and flag me down if you got any questions.